Your Worship, members of Council, thank you for the time to speak to this issue tonight. I had the privilege of being at the last Council meeting where this was talked about 2 weeks ago, and I had the exalted position of being the first outlier at that meeting. I was in the doorway, I could hear what was going on, but I couldn't see what was going on. And I could hear the rumblings in the hallway and the action inside the auditorium. And I'm very grateful for Council to make the accommodation this time around to make sure that all voices have a chance to be heard tonight. So I want to acknowledge that publicly tonight. I also want to recognize and acknowledge the latitude that you've granted us tonight, Your Worship, in terms of addressing a little beyond the agenda item of place and having an opportunity to talk to just the notion of a casino as well. And I appreciate that latitude that you've granted as well tonight. For people that don't know, I am the CEO of the United Way of Peterborough and District. I'm also the proud homeowner of a beautiful home in downtown Peterborough. And I really didn't want to wade in on this issue. It's a tough issue. It's tough to come in and cherry pick what are good employers and what are bad employers. And I was having a difficult time to anchor myself in a principled response. But I finally was able to do that. I was finally able to do that under the idea of I'm responsible as the CEO of the United Way of Peterborough and District to mitigate harm, to call attention to opportunities to help people in our community. And for me, the community is beyond just the city limits. And so I want to speak to that a bit, if I may. I also think it's very important for us to, as we develop communities, as we invest in communities, as we endeavor to have economic development, to ensure that we're evidence-based and strategic. And I want to reinforce some of the evidence that was presented to Council over the last couple of weeks, and again, that was made reference to tonight. We know through research, through evidence, that proximity to casinos increases risk for problem gambling. It's evidence. We know that, and that's been presented to this Council. We also know that problem gamblers represent 5% of all gamblers, but they represent 36% of revenue generated for casinos. Let's pause on that for a moment. This is a business model that's based on making money off of people's misery and addiction. And that's okay. They're not the only ones. And they're legitimate. But let's be clear what we're partnering with. And I'll make reference to how to mitigate that. We also know that people that are overrepresented in terms of problem gamblers are seniors, our youth, our First Nations peoples, and our poor people. They're overrepresented when it comes to problem gamblers. 4 groups that we're concerned with at the United Way of Peterborough, and certainly 4 groups that I'm absolutely certain that you're concerned about in terms of your care and your duty for community building. We also know through research, through evidence, that the prevalence of problem gambling doubles the year after a casino comes to a community. It doubles. And evidence, research has shown us that. So for me then, the challenge becomes, how do we mitigate harm and how do we enhance benefit if we're choosing to go down this road? I'm not a believer in referendums, especially referendums that were 20 years ago. There will be a referendum. It'll be your next election. And the majority of folks on this council, as I understand it, were voted in favor of having a casino in our community. And that's fine. I think the referendum will be the next election. And people can make a decision about whether that was good or not for the community. For me, again, I think of community. I think of Peterborough being beyond the city limits. And my concern is that this is more than just about money. I wish that 10 years ago, there was a joint proposal put together. I wish 10 years ago that a number of municipalities in our region came together with a plan to offer gaming in our community. The fact is, this isn't going to add to our net economic development. There's going to be a migration of jobs. And it's not a migration of jobs from a community that's 300 miles away. It's a migration of jobs from a community that's 10 minutes that way, or at least 10 minutes the way that I drive. And that's a concern for me. These are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are our sons, these are our daughters, these are people that belong to our same community. And I'm not sure what the upside benefit is collectively. in terms of the city and the county to move it at this point. And so I have two, and in summary, because many of the sentiments were echoed by predecessors, I have two hopes and two recommendations that I would like to be considered. My first hope and my first recommendation is to entertain the possibility of sitting down with the mayor and the deputy mayor from Cavan Monaghan and reopening or beginning discussions around, is there a possible other model? Is there a possible other way to do it that takes in account that we are all our brother's keeper, and that we are all our sister's keeper, and that this community of Peterborough is all of ours. To facilitate that, I'd be willing to host the mayor's summit. I'd even be willing to cook at my place if that would help the conversation to happen. And so that would be my first hope and my first recommendation. My second recommendation for consideration is that if we are moving ahead with this model, that we start to adopt what some of the other communities, some of the newer communities are moving into arrangements with service providers around gaming, and develop a social contract, that we set the terms around what we want to happen in our community if we are going to have a casino. That we say to those providers, most likely American providers, that we want to make sure that these are well-paying jobs. We want to make sure that there's a net benefit to the community. We want to dictate the terms in which you will do business here, and we want to ensure that you minimize the social impact and the social cost, and you maximize the benefit. You can do that. There are models for that across North America. And I think as we move ahead, should you choose to move ahead, that you begin to focus on what that social contract needs to look like for our community. Because we have evidence that there are going to be problems, there may be some gain financially, but you can exercise greater leadership around ensuring that the community is not hurt by the arrival of casinos. And with that, I will thank you and stop.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have questions? Councillor Rouse.
Sorry, through you, Your Worship. Mr. Russell, thank you very much for your presentation. You've given us a visionary approach to deal with the consequences of a gaming facility within our community, within Peterborough County. And you've talked about evidence-based figures that deal with the social consequences of gaming and gambling within our community. Would you agree that as a city, and representing the United Way agencies, that if we have these social consequences that have to be funded, do you feel that it would be appropriate for an opportunity to base the funding on the affected people and the demographic, just as we do in joint services with the city and county arrangement, where we pay for the social services based on population? Could you comment on that?
I want to make sure I understand your question. Are you talking about a shared service model with the county, or are you talking specifically about what kind of deal we should strike with a casino operator that comes to Peterborough?
Well, I appreciate your concern around OLG's responsibility to take the responsibility for the consequences of their operations. But I'm speaking more to the idea that when we look statistically at the fact that the funds that come from the revenues generated at the slots are coming 75%, or somewhere in that area, 70% from city residents.
Sure.
And we're paying the social cost for that facility being located adjacent to our community. Do you feel that the funding model should involve an evidence-based, quantifiable number, so to speak, so that the consequences of the gaming facility are paid for through the revenues that are generated by that facility?
I believe I understand your point, Councillor Bass. There's no question that the majority of money being spent right now at Gordon Downs is money from people from Peterborough going up there and spending money and gaming. I do believe that there should be a reopening of discussions about how to share the revenues and mitigate costs to both communities in terms of the social impact. Yeah, and I think that's a good conversation to have. I'm glad to hear you say that, because my worry is that much of the rhetoric around this issue has centered around the fact that people in cabinet are allowed to make money while we haven't benefited at all as the city over the last 10 years. And so the right decision then is to spend the next 2 years of only us getting the money that's generated through gaming. And, you know, us being equally unfair for the next 10 years in terms of coming up with an arrangement that respects the fact that we're a community collectively, I think is a much better approach. And I think you're right about that. And I would hope that people are open to those discussions.
Thank you. One more question, Your Worship, for you. Mr. Russell, you were at the meeting. You hopefully heard the discussion between the representatives from Cavan Monaghan and committee around the idea of working collaboratively to provide for industrial development and potentially recreational facilities and to share the pain and the gain associated with what this OLG reworking of their business model represents to the entire community. From your perspective, would you say that the ball's in the township's court to suggest that they are willing to come to the table as a player, knowing that, you know, it's difficult for us to move out of our jurisdiction in terms of coming together with this meeting that you're going to so graciously provide dinner for?
Councillor Rush, again, a little bit of debate there beyond just asking questions.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm just trying to take Mr. Russell's position, in his position, and elaborate on his comments for clarification. My apologies if I overstepped my bounds.
I think we understood where you were going. Councillor Doris.
Mr. Russell, thank you for your offer this evening and for your insight into the community needs, not only based on your experience that you've had since you came to Peterborough, but the experience you brought to our community. I was lobbied in the early days as a politician when the bingo hall was being set up. There were community organizations that wanted to help out within the community in a variety of community activities, wanted to help the poor, etc. And so I went and sat down at the bingo hall with the people who were applying, and as you know today, there are 44 different charities here in Peterborough that have workers go to the bingo hall, so the bingos are on there. And in fact, they've derived $8 million over the last 6 years out of that facility. And a lady said I didn't have a clue what was going on, so I said, get over there because they have slot machines. And I go over there, and sure enough, they got 30 machines that spit out a break-open ticket. But I was given the opportunity to play, and in fact, $5 was gone in the blink of an eye. But that's beside the point. The fact is that the community groups right now are depending on that money to continue the programs that they're providing for this community to the tune of you know, it's a lot of money going into the communities. And the government now has turned over the gambling into a major source of revenue for charitable organizations. I mean, you're getting it in different forms. And if you put it all up together, there's been millions of dollars here in the city of Peterborough come out through the tentacles of the government to these levels so you can run some of these programs. And that's why I, as a representative council, are saying, okay, if we're going to be in the game, let's get in where the revenue is. So, like, I listen here and I don't respond to the people, and I don't think they understand, like, from where I'm sitting, the game's out there and you better get in the game or there's going to be a collapse of community programs. And so would you comment on that?
Sure.
No. I'm just like to respond.
Sure. No, I'm happy to respond to that. I think if there's better ways to build supporting charities in our community than through gambling. And I appreciate the point that if we're going to get in it, let's make the best out of it. And that's why I make reference to my second choice, which was if you are going to get in it, then develop a social contract. Stipulate exactly what percentage of money before anyone can come and open a casino, where that money is going to go, how they're going to treat workers, who has the right of first refusal when workers are displaced. You need to be strategic about it if you're going to enter into it. My personal opinion is there's better models for economic development and supporting charitable work in the community.
But you haven't answered my question.
Which is?
where will the millions of dollars come from that are presently out there in the community through different activities that the province has put in place?
Well, first of all, there's not millions of dollars from casinos in place, and we're not debating bingo halls tonight before this council, Councillor Doris. With all due respect, sir, you know, I'm not...
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
And I did hear the waves, I saw the waves as well, thank you.
Yes, we did have a number of rounds of applause. Okay,
I knew it would be an unpopular question to ask.
next we have, sorry, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Mr. Russell, as the head of the United Way, do you have a current sense of the amount of money that is given to charitable organizations in Peterborough and the larger Peterborough community that comes from gaming?
I don't. I think that's a great question. I don't. But I think that, I mean, I know OLG talked about in very large global terms last week, or 2 weeks ago at the council meeting, in terms of some of that investment. Now, it was parsed out in terms of money that was for research as well as treatment, so I'm not quite sure if they could split it down or not. But I don't have a sense of how much money comes from gaming that goes towards charities at all.
Okay. And through Your Worship, currently, does the United Way receive any money from gaming?
Yes, we do, and I'm hoping to convince my board to stop it. We can currently get Nevada tickets, and I'm making the case for my board not to.
Okay. Now, through you, Your Worship, now, how much does the United Way receive?
It's a little less than $10,000.
$10,000. And through you, Your Worship, and I don't know when I ask this, does the United Way, is there any kind of funding that they receive from Trillium?
Sure. Yep.
They do, so that comes from gaming as well. And how much money do you receive through Trillium?
We haven't had a Trillium grant in a few years. The last Trillium grant, I'd have to double check this, and I'll get the exact number, but was around $50,000 to $60,000, and that would have been 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay. Okay, and through Your Worship, Mr. Russell, if you could just, in future, there's no rush for it, but just so I can have a number, you know, in the past 10 years, how much money the United Way of Peterborough has received from gaming, that would be great. Do
you mean from Trillium?
Well, from Nevada, from Trillium, and I don't know what to ask. I'm saying gaming as a broad, because this is one of the things Councillor Doris was getting at, is that it's been integrated through charities, through sports teams, through social service agencies, and if we're against gambling and we want to eliminate gambling, where is those groups going to pick up their funding? And it's a legitimate question.
It's certainly a legitimate question. I think more and more charities are starting to do their own internal reflection about the appropriateness of taking money from gaming. Some won't take alcohol money, some won't take tobacco money, and some indeed won't take gambling money. So that conversation is happening within the sector itself as well, and certainly within our walls at United Way. But you're right, there's been a culture of getting used to it, but I think it's exercises like this that are forcing a deeper reflection on that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Your Worship.